Or like, okay, perfect. So this is follow the feel good of 4-week container program designed to help busy people achieve more success by overthinking less. We talked about what this container is last week. Now we're going to just dive in a little bit more. So we're in week 2, verse 2. So we did an audit of our lives. We took inventory of where we're at. Now we're going to peel the curtain back a little bit further and peel back the layers and look into examining the beliefs that have led to that status and where we are. So we are examining our beliefs. And again, this is based off the song. The structure is all based on the structure of the song. So this is week 2, verse 2. And verse 2 is, the only choice you've got is just keep moving on, because everything you ever thought now suddenly seems wrong. When you're looking for your groove, don't look to someone else. You might get lost a time or two, but you can find yourself. And the meaning of this is essentially, all we can do is keep moving on, especially even when you're like, what in the world is happening right now? Like everything just seems out of balance or out of whack, or maybe everything seems fine, but there are certain aspects of life or your environment where you're like, oh, I don't know what's going on. All you can do is keep moving on, and also moving on in a way that feels right to you. So the whole point of, you might get lost a time or two, but you can find yourself. Don't look to, when you're looking for your groove, don't look to someone else. It's like, don't try to repeat or replicate what's being done. You can be inspired by what's being done, but the best part of you being you is offering your own unique magic sauce and that's just not in business, that's in life, to your friendships, to your family members. You being you is so specific and unique that no one else can do it. So while yes, absolutely, you can pull from inspiration from other places, you're the only you. So you got to find your own groove and you got to keep moving on. So with that in mind, we're talking about moving on given our current circumstances. So just start to think about now, what were your findings from last week's journal prompt? By now we have an idea of the areas of our life that are open to improving and why. So kind of sit with yourself for a little bit and think about what you discovered in that journal prompt. Those were all the different areas that we were examining and giving them a score, and then asking ourselves why we gave it that score. So why is based off how have you been showing up or not showing up? And showing up meaning how much time and energy and intention have you been dedicating to that area? So be it relationships, be it environment, anything, how have you been showing up in that department? So that's just to say, that's not to say there's any judgment there. That's not to say, oh, you haven't been doing it right, or no, none of that. It's just asking very objectively, well, how have I been showing up? Because if you can remove that judgment from it, then you can really fine tune it and grow and improve so that it aligns more with what you want to create. So how have you been showing up? And like we said in the song, you just got to keep moving on. We know that we must keep moving forward, even when it feels like we have no control, because there is one thing you can always control, and you can see it there in the slide. It's our actions. You cannot control what anyone does, says, thinks, feels. You can't even control the thoughts that might pop up in your own head sometimes. But what you can control is what you do about it. So, for example, if someone else says something that really hurts you or puts you off, you have the choice to process it, to handle it, to do what feels most aligned with your highest self. Your highest self being the best version of you. When you think of, so if I ever say highest self, by the way, in the future, that just means the version of you that's like, at your best, feeling your best, behaving in a way that really feels in alignment. Like, it's kind of like that. What would Jesus do? It's like, what would your highest self do? It's like when you're coming from the most love, like when you're filled up with love, because you can pretty much narrow down your decision making to 2 categories. And I say this loosely because some of the categories, it might be on a spectrum, but you're deciding things usually out of love or out of fear. And then there's some kind of like neutral gray area, but for the sake of this container, we'll be talking about decisions that are more rooted in love or fear. So what you do have the control over is whether you choose to do something in love or in fear. For example, if someone says something that is really hurtful, you have the choice to say, hey, you know what, even if you might love this person, you might not love this person, but you have the choice to say, hey, I am, feeling really hurt by this. I need to take a minute and come back. That's a choice more out of love. Or you can make a choice more out of fear, which is that reaction, like, ego kind of like, screw you, where you kind of just tell them to, screw off or whatever. And that's more of a fear-based action. That's an example of one way where you can control your actions. Another thing is your thoughts. How many people do you know that lay there every night before they go to bed, awake, thinking thoughts? I mean, do you know so many people who do that? Because I do, myself included. The thing is, you can't control sometimes those thoughts that pop up in your head, but what you can control is whether or not you give your attention to them. For example, if you're constantly having a thought pop up and you're like, no, don't think that, thought pop up, no, don't think that, that's actually not going to help you. Just the same way as if a thought pops up and you go and do the deep dive in the rabbit hole and like think, and you're spiraling, that's not helpful either. What is helpful is you can say, I choose differently. I choose that it's time to sleep right now. Or if you think a negative thought about yourself, for example, I'm no good, say, I choose that's not true, immediately reject thought. I choose to believe that I am good enough. So again, this is just to say, sometimes people are like, control your thoughts. And yes, control your thoughts to a certain extent, but sometimes you can't know what's going to pop up because our minds are very complex. And sometimes things will pop up where you're like, where did that come from? So if that ever happens, all you need to do is just catch it. Again, you have that beautiful list of supplemental tools. There's catch and release on there. There's so many different resources you can use, but you just catch that thought and then release it, and then you can replace it with something else. So again, we can't control our external circumstances. We also can't control the example that's been set for us before, but we can choose to give our attention to that or not. So, for example, some people are like, oh, I can't be successful because nobody in my family was ever successful. And it's like, well, you can choose to give your attention to that, therefore to never be successful, or you can choose to direct your attention towards ways you can be successful and away from the fact that you don't have any examples of success. So those are some ways that you can reclaim that control. And those are some ways that you can start kind of examining your beliefs. Now, how can we start building better feeling beliefs? It's by looking at our current ones. Again, like I said, in order to build, you got to know what we're dealing with. You got to know what you're working with here. So you can look at your money beliefs, your time beliefs, your work-life balance beliefs, your health beliefs, even I didn't put it here, but your relationship beliefs, anything along those lines. You can look at those current beliefs, and that will tell you where you're at. If you don't know, even just by looking, if you can't sit there and ask yourself, well, what do I believe about money? What do I believe about time? What do I believe? If you can't think of anything, a really great way to know what your current situation is by looking at your standard right now, looking at what you're doing. Like, so if you don't know what your money beliefs are, look at your relationship with money. If you don't know what your time beliefs are, look at your relationship with time. If you don't know what your health beliefs are, look at your relationship with health, and so on and so forth. And if you still are like, I'm not really sure, looking to your journal prompt responses from last week's journal prompt will help you. So your scores and your whys. So those are some ways that you can really start looking at your beliefs. And again, this is for you. This is for you to process. And over the next week, you'll be able to come back to this. You can watch the replay of this live. You can look at this slide again. You can take time. Like this takes time. It's like they say you gotta walk before you can run. You gotta crawl before you can walk. It's one step at a time. So if you're not used to looking at your beliefs and really diving in, that's okay. It's a practice. It's not like you're going to immediately sit, you know, sit in front of a wheel on a plane and be able to fly it. Like, you have to take time. Same thing with the gym. Anything takes time. It's a practice. So patience is definitely a virtue. And also know that you're doing the best by just showing up and by learning these things and asking yourself these questions. So look at your current beliefs, ask yourself, what are those? You can start thinking about those now too. Again, just by examining your relationship with any given category, and also by looking at your journal prompt that you did. A common notion or concept in the world of like self improvement is your external world is a reflection of your internal world. So that goes a little bit more to, of course, obviously you can't control what happens outside of you, but you can control your internal world, which can help you produce results that improve your external world. So you have to ask yourself right now, in terms of your beliefs, well, what person do you want to be? What kind of person do you want to be? And look back at those current beliefs and evaluate them through the lens of who you want to be, and ask yourself which ones align, if any. If you want to be someone who feels like you have an abundance of time and you don't feel like super pressed or pressured, then how do your current beliefs with time support or take away from that? If you want to feel like you're in excellent like health, given your circumstances, if you want to feel like, hey, I'm a healthy person, I know my body's always working for me, how is your current belief holding that up or taking away from that? So you have to start asking yourself, who do I want to be? Because that's going to help you really look at your current beliefs and choose whether or not you want to keep continuing those beliefs. Now, how do you even get those beliefs to begin with? If you're like, I want to be healthy. How did I get to be like, why am I unhealthy? Or, I want to have, I want to have a great relationship with money. I want to feel like money is flowing. I'm not worried about losing it. Why do I feel like I'm always going to lose it? Well, there are a lot of different ways you can develop beliefs. One is at home from your family. Another one is from school, also from media, or from your environment, like your location, even your city, your state, your regional area. Those actually have a very big impact on your beliefs, more than you know. Also, your local views or local beliefs, like in your town or in your city, what they have, the people in your life outside of family, like friends or family friends, even distant relatives, I would say, you can have like the most amazing home life and still develop some really misaligned beliefs just from other external sources, and also we tend to, in our lineage, pass down beliefs. So if there's something that you believe, likely your child will believe it as well, because we tend to be products of our environment until we decide to choose differently. So again, you can have, but that being said, you can have an amazing home life where you're super supported. But if you look to the media and see a lot of fear and a lot of more disempowered content, that can create some beliefs within you as well. Maybe that you're not safe or something along those lines. So again, when we're talking about looking at our current beliefs, what are limiting beliefs? I mean, I'm talking to you now about like, what do you believe about money? Or what do you believe about yourself? Or what do you believe about time? If you're like, well, I don't know what these beliefs are, here are some examples of limiting beliefs. Money is hard to come by. I'm not lovable. I don't deserve the things I want. And again, you can identify these beliefs based off of whether your current circumstances reflect this. For example, if you feel like I'm not lovable, that might result in you not having great relationships with people. If you feel like I don't deserve the things I want, then you might not ever allow yourself to receive the things you want. If you feel like I could never achieve my dreams, then you might not even attempt to do so. or you might attempt to do so but give up. If you feel like you don't have any healthy relationships, you might have friendships or, you know, family or romantic relationships, but they might be unhealthy. They might be codependent, or they might be more toxic. If you don't think your well-being is priority, then you might be putting everything and everyone else above your own well-being. It's too hard to be healthy. The only way to succeed in life is to make big sacrifices. This is a really common misconception, is that the only way to success is to, you know, work until you can't stand anymore and blood, sweat, and tears. And it's like, absolutely, absolutely, work and intention and effort is required. But if you're constantly in a state, because again, things ebb and flow, different seasons in life. So sometimes, I was just talking today to my accountability partners, some seasons in life, you just really have to be giving more attention to one area. Right now, for her and for myself, it's more business. But if you're constantly giving all of your or most of your attention to one area, then you're lacking. So that's why you see celebrities who have so much fame and money and they're miserable, because they're sacrificing healthy relationships and downtime and their own well-being. That's why people think, oh, if I'm successful, I'll have everything. And it's like, well, if you think success equals happiness, then why do we see so many overdoses in celebrities, or so many miserable people who have a lot of money? Or if you think even like the standard corporate, you know, like suit wearing uptight person who's like just miserable all the time, it's because success and money do not equal happiness. It's a part of the equation. So if you really want to be successful, look at holistic success, where you feel like you can make money and have good relationships, where you can prioritize your well-being and have fun. You know, look at ways that you can bring it all in for yourself, because it is possible. There are people that have that. There are people that have loads of money and do a lot of good for the world and have great relationships with people. And yes, they still have their down days, but you can definitely put a lot of work and effort and energy and intention into what you do. In fact, that's an important part of it. That being said, if you're just on the grind 24/7 nonstop, you're going to burn out and you're not going to be happy. So it's all about a balance. It's all about not over sacrificing different aspects of your life that are critical to your overall happiness. So a lot of people, you see, this is really reflected in like the celebrity culture for sure, is the only way to succeed is to make big sacrifices. I'm too young, or I'm too old. Maybe you feel like, oh, I don't know enough yet, I'm too young. Or maybe you're like, oh, my time has passed. Not true. There is no such thing as too young or too old. There are people out there who are in their 90s who are just really starting to like realize who they really are. There are people out there who are not even finished with high school and they're making, you know, huge discoveries. Like, the age is super relative. It's all about where you are. I'm not good enough. I don't have enough time. I'm not smart enough. Again, any of those not enoughs. You can look at your current situation and see, like, are there any ways where you feel like you're not enough? And just generally speaking, like, when you think about doing something that maybe is a little bit outside of your comfort zone, like if you want to be able to see more people, if you want to travel more, or if you want to start a business, or if you want to start teaching something, or if you want to choose a new career or choose a career, like if those things feel like they're so scary that you won't even do it, then that's probably I'm not good enough. Now, being a little bit scared, not a bad thing at all. Actually, and this is something that we've talked about before, my dad and I, about with nerves. Like sometimes you can channel that fear and realize it's just excitement and it's just growth. So sometimes you can channel those nerves or a little bit of that, ooh, scary. It's taking the leap of faith. So yes, does it require some kind of courage to do something big and different? Of course. Can that be a little bit scary? Yeah. But are you making the decision to do that out of fear or out of love? Sometimes you have to make a scary decision out of love. For example, if you're launching a course, or if you're traveling to a new country, or if you're doing something you've never done before, but it's for your well-being and your overall happiness, yeah, it could be scary, but you're doing it for love. Now, if you're like, oh my gosh, I have this big presentation, or I have this thing that I need to do and it's so scary, I just don't think I can do it. Or if you have a violin recital and you're like, I can't do this, I gotta cut and run. That's fear. That's not love. That is fear. And you can usually tell the difference between love or even intuition and fear, because fear is a lot more frantic. It's a lot more like, oh my God, it's very sudden, it's panicky. Love and intuition are a lot more like a deep knowing, like, oh my gosh, this is freaky, but I know it'll help me. Or, oh my gosh, this is new territory, but I know this is something I want. So that's also like a little like bonus discussion is like intuition or love versus fear. So now that we have realized some limiting beliefs, some things that we're choosing out of fear instead of out of love, looking at all the different areas of our life and what it tells us about our beliefs, now that we're starting to kind of discover those, it's time to let them go. So now that you know what you're working with, you've asked yourself, is this in alignment with who I want to be or not? You're starting to bring these things to your awareness. You're starting to examine, do my beliefs support who I want to be? And if they don't, you got to let them go, because if they stay with you, it's going to keep creating the same thing and history is going to keep repeating itself. So now that it's time to let it go, how can we do that? How can we let it go? Well, this goes into our journal prompt for next week. It is 2 parts and there's extra credit. So part number 1 is look at your scores from last week. What limiting beliefs do they reflect? Write down each limiting belief that you can detect. And that's part 1, is writing down each limiting belief. Underneath each limiting belief, this is part 2. After you write each one, thank it, give it back to whom or wherever it came from. And if you don't know who exactly or where exactly it came from, you can say, I give you back to wherever you came from, and then release it. So this part, you're welcome to either say it out loud or write it down, or do both. For example, if you're looking at your scores from last week and your score with money is really low, and you're like, oh shoot, I don't feel worthy of money. And you're like, where did that belief come from? And you realize everybody in my town kind of settled for like a lower amount of money. So you realize this kind of came from my town growing up, like the general like local view. So you can say, either write down, I don't deserve to have a lot of money. So you've identified the belief. Underneath that, you can write out, or you can say out loud, thank you to that belief. Say, thank you. I give you back to the local views of my townspeople, and I release you. Or you can write that down, or you can do both. It's honestly it's all dependent on what feels best for you. But the idea here is to write it out, the belief itself, then look at it and either write or say, thank you. I give you back to wherever you came from, and I release you. And so that's that. So you do that with each belief, even if you have a lot of them, do it with each one. Trust me, it's worth it. And then the extra credit is if you can catch yourself in a moment in this next week, up until we meet again next Thursday, catch yourself in a moment when any limiting belief is coming up, any one of them that you've identified, and then turn to one of your supplemental tools so you can choose differently, so you can work through it. There's a whole list of them. I sent you the visual and the video explaining the visual. But the thing is, yes, you are highly encouraged to acknowledge and release each belief. Is it just going to magically disappear like that? Maybe not. It might take some time. It might take some repetition. That being said, you've got to start somewhere. The first and best place to start is just by acknowledging it and choosing differently. So this journal prompt for next week is write down your limiting beliefs that you've discovered through your journal prompt from last week, and then write or say out loud, thank you, I give you back to where you came from, I release you. And that is your journal prompt along with the extra credit. So the extra credit, again, is catching yourself. For example, if continuing with that money example that we used, if you're like, oh, I gave my I don't deserve enough money belief back to my town and I released it, and then you see yourself kind of getting uncomfortable after you've made a purchase, like maybe you bought yourself a meal and then you're like, oh, that was expensive. Bing, you caught yourself. You feel like you don't deserve to spend that money on yourself. And I'm not saying to go out and blow everything that you own, not at all. But I'm saying, yes, you are worthy of spending money on yourself for a meal here and there. You know your budget, but the thing is, no matter what your budget is, you can find a way to incorporate self-care into that, because it doesn't have to break the bank. So if you find yourself already having decided, I'm going to take myself out for dinner, this is my treat, and then you buy the dinner and you're like, oh, that's expensive. There you go. That's the limiting belief command. So you can just say, hey, catching you, and I release you. That's one of the tools in the supplemental list, is catch and release. If you haven't seen that already, that's one that I created myself based off of just putting together different techniques that I've learned. So catch and release it. That's one way. You can do it so many different ways. You can just say, that's not true. Thank you. I do deserve this. However it feels right to you. So that is your journal prompt for next week. It's a little bit longer, but honestly, we're condensing so much knowledge and experience that I have taken away from all of these various different courses and resources and tools and classes and webinars and seminars and books and podcasts, basically taking all of that and condensing it to 4 weeks. So this is going to require you to really show up for yourself and dig deep, because you're worth it. And if not to live the most lit up life, what's the point? Yes, this will take effort. Like we said, some things take effort, but you are worth this effort and you are worth this investment. So that is the assignment for next week. Again, this is the cleaning out the closet stage, okay? You can't redecorate your apartment or you can't reorganize your closet unless you clean it out first. So we're removing all the things that no longer serve us to make room for what we do want to create. So that's this stage. Now we're going to move into the discussion of our scores. I'm going to ask everybody who's here live, was there a score that you were surprised by from last week's journal prompt? In which area do you feel that you could use the most support in? So I'm going to move us off into the live chat. Everyone who's watching via playback, thank you so much. I love you all. And I will see you, playback friends, next week. Woo! Okay.